we're good. We'll get started. Thank you. This is sweet. I've never had so many lovely people who are friends in the room. Thank you so much for coming to my talk, Criticlash Wildlife. I'm going to be doing a paid user acquisition postmortem today about my experiences running UA for the last year and a half. Before I start, who here does user acquisition as a job? Can you raise your hand, please? Okay, well, if at any point there are things that I'm saying that need an explanation, like the numerous jargon or acronyms that I'm about to embark upon, please just make a weird face at me and I'll try and explain a little bit more what I'm talking about. All right, so I am one of the co-founders of Lumi Interactive. Formerly, it was myself and Lauren Clinic as Lumi Consulting. We did PR and marketing and games for the last 9 years. And we joined forces to create this new company with Christina Chen, formerly from PopCap, and Microsoft to create Lumi Interactive. We did that in 2018 and launched our first game this year. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. So the first game is called Criticlash. If you haven't heard of it, it's a slingshot jungle battle game. It's an online multiplayer strategy, one of the most competitive genres in the market, a very interesting start to making games and releasing them. I don't know if I'd recommend that you start there, especially if you're doing UA. But yeah, it's our first ever studio release in collaboration with Shanghai-based Jump Games. We launched on Android on April 2nd this year, and we recently launched on iOS in June. Since we've launched, we've had over 600k total installs so far, and of that, paid installs 72,000. So did any of you here see my talk from last year where I talked about how you did? Thank you so much for coming. If you didn't catch that talk, it's not a prerequisite, but it's a more, I'd say it's an easier breakdown of how to get started in user acquisition if that's what you're looking for. And it talks about how I started UA for the first time, how I learned to use the platforms, the tools that I did for research, and I talk more about early market testing, which might be relevant for some of you. And also the early mistakes that I made. Now I'm talking about the big mistakes that I made a year later. And yeah, the challenges. So you can catch that one here at that link. And this year, I'm going to be showing you actually what happened over the last year and a half with the UA that I've been running. So just before, this is a timeline of Criticlash. So we signed the co-development agreement in July 2018. We went through our soft launch period doing Western optimization, soft launching in Australia, and did various experiments to try and raise monetization, tune our economy, etc. We then got early access featuring around the time that we needed to start testing for our baseline metrics and KPIs, and to, of course, validate the changes that we've been making. And then we joined Start on Android program, which gave us access to a lot more traffic and further allowed us to further validate the changes that we had been making. After that, we went into pre-registration featuring. I'm sure some of you would have seen the spammy adverts that I was doing around that time. We got 600,000 pre-registrations through that program, and then released in April and got a global feature with Android, as well as an Indie Corner feature, and then another month of Indie Corner featuring. Then we didn't release iOS until late June, early July, and recently had our first feature with Apple. So today, I'm going to be mostly focusing on the best performing regions that I ran campaigns in, mostly the US and mostly Android, just because that's where I spent most of my money and where I've got the most insights. If you want further information, like after this talk, please just come and talk to me. I do have global insights as well. This is the user acquisition process that I use, roughly. It's not a hard and fast rule, it's just the process that I went through, so I'll take you through that just a little bit. So the first stage is market testing, where we test who actually is our audience for this game. So you've got your game and you're thinking, all right, well, who's going to play it? From there, you take it to the assets and creatives that you're going to start the test and learn phase with, and test who's actually clicking through on this, what's engaging to this audience. Then you go into the test and learn phase, which is essentially a 2 to 6 week period, or as long as you can really afford, which is where you test as many platforms as you can afford to try and figure out where should you advertise, what platforms are going to be the best bang for buck for you, and also what regions are going to be your highest performing. I then go into the ROI phase, which is testing what can I actually get back from my investment after the initial selections of geographic regions, and how fast can I get that back. And that will inform how much I'm going to spend in which areas, and give me more information about the quality of traffic. Then you go into the launch phase, which is when you actually run your campaigns for real. We were supporting featuring to acquire users and trying to get velocity and volume to push us up the charts to increase organic uplift, which I'll explain further later. And then if that is not quite working, you go back into an optimization phase, or really you should be going back into an optimization phase anyway to update your creatives, make sure that they're still performing, or to make changes to the game before you run another test and learn phase. And hopefully that's been successful and your test and learn phase looks positive, which is when you can then scale if your ROI is achieved. Well, it sounds simple, but it's not that simple. Really briefly, this is a kind of outline of most of the ads that I ran and the types of campaigns. So we started off doing reach and traffic campaigns, and discovered that our main audience was a male 13 to 35 audience. We followed that by the asset tests, as I mentioned, and discovered that most our players preferred the mastery or action type assets, which means that they were showcasing competition or strategy elements of the game. They had the highest click-through rates, and we did that through Facebook. We then moved on to different type of advertising, which is when you're essentially trying to buy traffic to validate experiments that your monetization team is running. I, in hindsight, wouldn't really recommend this, although you have to do it. You have to get traffic somehow unless you get free traffic. But the problem with this is that in early access and with paid advertising, you're not going to get a true understanding of what your LTV or your ARPPU is. So it's kind of difficult to set your benchmarks on that if you are doing it, just a warning. We then ran I wasn't having much luck with the Facebook app installs, which if you saw on my talk last year, you'll know I was really struggling with. But I found that UAC install campaigns were able to lower my CPI and get them to an area that was reasonable, which I thought that I could probably optimize from. And then, I ran an ROI test, which is that third to last phase that you saw before, to try and discover like how long it would take me in the highest performing region, which for us was the US, to recover our money. And as you can see there, over time, I'm slowly lowering the cost per install and finding out that the most promising regions are Eastern Europe and Canada, and also Russia and the US. During pre-registration, the February to March period, if you are going through a soft launch optimization, please remember that you cannot get traffic through your game at that point, so you can't test, essentially. So you have a whole month that you need to plan for. So I really recommend that you have a soft launch region open prior to that, 3 months before, or after. Well, you can't even really do it after, because as soon as you turn it back to beta or you launch your game, your traffic is then live. So your soft launch testing has to essentially be complete by then. And you can see there that the Facebook app install campaigns that we were running just weren't working. We were getting like $90 to $140 per purchase action. It's just like insane. But with Google, we were able to get 60% ROAS after 5 days, which I'll talk further through later. And then finally, we launched supporting our Google feature with CPI campaigns and then CPA campaigns, cost per install, or target cost per action, for those of you that aren't familiar. And then essentially tried to improve our traffic by switching to action-based campaigns, because CPI campaigns weren't getting us the installs that we wanted or the type of installs that we wanted. And then we launched iOS, and I ran another test and learn phase. So that's another 4 ad platforms, completely new creatives, everything, because you can't really apply that much of the learnings that you have on Android to your Google or to your iOS campaigns. They're very different, and I'll go through why that is. And then September, I've been running Facebook Android install campaigns and getting really good cost installs. So that's pretty much most of the ads that I ran over this period of time, and that's important because I'm about to show you a bunch of graphs that refer to those ads. So the first part is I'm going to be talking through the impact of features on our UA and the impact of features generally, because I think it's a really important topic if you're creating mobile games right now, and it's a changing topic as well. So it'll be interesting for you guys to compare like how our traffic breaks down to yours, I think. So the expectations versus the reality. Some assumptions that I went into this launch featuring period with is that the cost per install would go down in the featuring period, that featuring user lifetime value would only be slightly lower than organic, slightly different from our regular organic traffic, and then that organic uplift during featuring would actually increase. So we did see some of that, but CPIs actually went slightly up during that period, increasing our costs. And featuring user LTV was much lower than organic, like 4 times lower. So it did impact our position in the charts, but we weren't able to get above 35 with paid user acquisition, even with featuring. So it just shows you that above 35, maintaining that in the charts is exponentially more difficult and more costly. And yeah, organic uplift during featuring does bring better traffic, does bring new users in, which I'll take you through. So this is a traffic source breakdown since launch of our Android. It shows you out of the 600,000 installs that we've had on Android where those users all came from. So you can see here that our pre-registration conversion was one of the biggest sources of traffic, followed by our first feature, and then a little more diminished is our second feature, and then the rest of it is accounted for by organic. You can see that despite like the amount that we actually spend, the paid CPI campaigns are actually a really small percentage of what we were able to bring in, and how much they boosted those feature numbers, it's difficult to say, but I've done my best. This is the impact of features by feature type. So this should give you an idea of like how impactful certain types of features actually were. So you can see that the pre-registration there was still our best feature. Indie Corner actually didn't account for much when we weren't being featured actively in the banner or anything like that. That was just in the carousel. And then our second feature was about a quarter less than our first feature. So if you are running a pre-registration campaign or have access to early access traffic, I would definitely run campaigns for them because they tend to be some of your most loyal, dedicated users and also some of the highest quality traffic. So this looks at our pre-registration conversions. So of the 600,000 people that signed up, we got around 124,000 that actually converted when we went to live, around a 20.7% conversion rate. I've heard between 15 and 50, depending on who you talk to. I think 50 would be an incredible conversion rate, but yeah, we think we got around 20. And the reason that I say that we think is because what we actually did is, instead of going live from pre-registration, which triggers the notification and triggers the Google dashboard to show you that yellow bump in the center there, which represents your conversions, we instead went back to beta to do more testing, and therefore the Google dashboard actually did not show us those conversions as the yellow mark. They just looked like organic traffic to us. So that was a really massive misunderstanding and caused a lot of ongoing issues with the UA decision making that we did after that, because it impacted the way that we saw our lifetime value. So yeah, you can see obviously when we turned it over, it's got this huge spike but isn't showing us where it's from. So don't use any pre-registration or early access traffic as a benchmark to set your UA KPIs, because it's not going to be representative of your live organic traffic. So how does paid campaigns actually impact, how does features actually impact your paid campaigns? So these two the left bottom and the top right are showing the impact of Google's CPI campaigns on the cost per installation. So you can see there in the purple boxes, that's the featuring period that I've highlighted there for you. And the line going up represents the cost of our acquisition actually increasing during that period. So the CPI campaigns, the cost per install campaigns, that price actually increased per install. But for the TCPA campaigns, the target cost per acquisition campaigns, which does drive higher quality traffic, the cost actually decreased. So if you have a feature and you're thinking of running some kind of campaigns, potentially TCPA campaigns might be the best bang for buck for you, depending on your title. And then you can also see that the impact of featuring, what the impact of featuring was on the paid install volume, and the bottom right, that basically shows the paid campaign mirrors a little bit of the bump there from the featuring. So you can see that the organic uplift is actually increasing, and that the volume of installs that you're getting during that period is also increasing, most likely due to the visibility on the app stores. This is what it looks like as a sheet. The featuring period, again, is surrounded by the little red line, and where the green is essentially showing that our metrics all improved during that period of time, or a lot of them improved, specifically looking at the ratio of organic uplift here. So you can see that right in the middle of our featuring, we were getting the best organic uplift. If you don't know what that means, it essentially means that for every paid user that we brought in, we got 3 to 3.8 additional organic users. There's an argument to be made that if you're paying for just one user and you're bringing in 3 organics, that is a really good time to do cost per installation. However, you do need to look at what the quality of those users are that you're bringing in during that period, which I'll show you later. And you can also obviously see also the purchases are going up because there's more people. This is how our features impacted our chart position. It's a bit difficult to read because it's the inverse for the chart position. So you can see that where the highest point in the featuring bump is, this is just for the US, that our featuring point was at the lowest. So the lowest we were able to get in the US charts, I think, was around 35 on the strategy or action charts. And the way that chart position generally works is that it's a combination of the volume of installs and the velocity with which you get those installs. That is what's going to drive you up the charts. And that's where CPI campaigns, or cost per installation campaigns, can really help, especially if you're trying to get into those top 10, if you have that budget. This is just another way of representing it. So at the bottom you can see our highest organic uplift was in the middle. It's mirroring the feature again, and going up the charts increases visibility. So if you have sufficient velocity, like I said, you will increase your likelihood of organic uplift. So it's best to try and leverage these opportunities when you do get them. And yeah, I've already sort of mentioned that 3.8 was the highest we were able to get, as opposed to our regular organic traffic, where when I was running paid CPI or TCPA campaigns, the most I was able to get in organic uplift was about 1.5. So for every 1 user I brought in through an ad campaign, I was bringing in an additional 1.5 people. And this is how the features impacted our LTV and ARPPU, or our average revenue per paying user on Android. What is really surprising to me is just how much the ARPU actually dropped during the featuring period. I have never seen metrics drop this far during a featuring period. So we went from US 94 cents 30-day LTV to 19 cents, which is like 4 times lower. It's an incredible drop. Usually it's around 20-25% based on what people have told me. And I think the reason for that is because during a featuring period, you have to think about the intention to play versus the intention to pay. And when you've been given so much discoverability on the app stores, you're essentially getting in users who otherwise wouldn't have searched keywords or categories for your game. So you're getting users in that are not really looking for your type of game. They might just be downloading it and playing it, which means that they don't have the intention to necessarily play your type of game, and they certainly don't have the intention to pay for your type of game. And I think that's one of the reasons why featuring traffic isn't as good as regular traffic, although featuring traffic is still better than paid CPI traffic. And you can see here in the graph that the ARPPU, which is the bottom, is the inverse of the featuring, so you can see exactly where it started dropping off. This is also why I think Apple's search ads work really well, because you are bidding on a keyword, and potential players who are searching a keyword have much more intention to play and intention to pay. As long as you can do an exact match campaign and you have the budget to run Apple search ads, I think they're probably worth it. I didn't get them to work for me, but I think they could definitely work for other people. So yeah, we obviously made a bunch of mistakes. So misunderstanding number one was that the organic traffic that came in after our launch period was actually not ad brought in organic traffic. So we saw that big spike that I mentioned earlier. It was actually pre-registration conversions. It wasn't organic traffic. And at that time, we happened to be running an ROI campaign. So that really threw off our numbers. So just make sure if you are running an ROI campaign that your traffic is going to be stable and that you don't have an unexpected spike, or that you definitely know where the source of your traffic is coming from, because that can really throw you out. As I mentioned, like, it looked as though we were getting 60% ROAS within 5 days, and Firebase incorrectly reported our revenue as well. So make sure you cross-check on your platforms, because yeah, you just don't want to end up in a situation where you don't know where your traffic's coming from or why it's showing. If it seems too good to be true, basically it is. So make sure you double check. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about quality and what the difference is across different sources of traffic for quality that I found. So if you don't know what traffic quality is, it refers to the performance of specific advertising channel traffic. So how much do players spend in the game, how quickly do they spend it, and how fast can you get it back? It also looks at the ratio of costs versus revenue over time. And different advertising channels have different traffic quality, as do different platforms, advertising platforms, as well as the platform that your game is actually on. So Android and iOS will have different quality, and so will like if you're on Tapjoy or Google or Facebook, they can all be different. And there's like the top two they say is Google and Facebook, but to be honest, it really depends on your title and the context of the other games that are around your title when they're being displayed on various ad networks. And yeah, in the corner here, you can see a comparison between what the effective cost per install was and what the ARPU was, and then the ROI in AppsFlyer, which I recommend using because it's a lot easier than doing it manually like you saw me doing earlier. So the classic equation that you probably have all heard of is that cost per installation needs to be less than your lifetime value. That's obvious, otherwise you can't really spend money in the game. However, it is a lot more complicated than just getting low CPIs. You have to make sure that your traffic quality is high enough to outweigh the cost of those CPIs. And you really need a tool to do this effectively. You can do it manually, but it is really time consuming, and it's also dependent on things like time zone, different countries. You need to be consistent with your traffic, and if you're getting your install data from different sources, it's just going to be really difficult to do that accurately. You also need to make sure that you factor in any obligations that you have to third parties, platforms or publishing agreements when you're calculating your ROI, because that means you actually need more than you think you do for the base equation. And you need to clearly understand what your players need to pay in order for you to be sustainable, meaning that you need to provide a quality experience for them. It used to be that we would calculate ROI over a 90-day period or even 30 days, like a couple of years ago, but now it's pretty common to see 90 to even up to 220 days for an LTV, which is being used commonly by larger companies as a metric to recover their ad spend, which I think is crazy. Obviously, you can imagine that this is extremely difficult to cover if you have a cash flow, because you're spending so much money and you're waiting almost half a year to recover that spend. It can be pretty tricky to manage. I already went through that. So this is LTV, lifetime value by traffic source, since launch on Android. So I'm basically showing you the one half of the equation, which is how much a player is spending from different traffic sources. So the number one there is our virality. So that's people who are sharing GIFs from the games and inviting new players in. So it's like the referral system that we have in Criticlash. You can also see here that our pre-registration traffic, our organic traffic pre-launch is some of our best quality traffic, followed by TCPA campaigns. If you look over in paid CPI campaigns, it's a dismal 8 cents USD, which was very shocking to me. I don't know if other people had had this experience as well. But yeah, I know that CPI campaigns aren't used for return on ad spend, but I was shocked to see just how different it was when you compare to your organic or viral traffic. So yeah, essentially, the other interesting thing to note here is that the featuring traffic compared to our organic traffic is so low too, around 25 to 35 cents USD, which means that if you are running those cost per install campaigns during the featuring, like I said before, and you're trying to leverage that organic uplift, you're actually only getting the same as one regular organic user because they're paying 25 cents as opposed to over $1. So it's really hard. You've got to keep on juggling and trying to optimize to get the right sources of traffic, and of course making sure you optimize your game at the same time. And yeah, so you can see through this there's no constant, even by channel. It depends on where and how you're being discovered, the platform you're on, what your ads look like, and many other factors. So this is a comparison as well between our iOS 20-day, sorry I don't have 30-day yet, and our Android 30-day traffic. So for Android, our TCPA campaigns brought in the best quality of traffic, followed by organic, and on Apple, our Apple search ads did. Now, the thing that we need to remember about this is it's not just about what, like how much they're bringing in, it's about how much we're actually paying for those users. And when you look at the costs associated with some of these best performing quality traffic channels, it's actually still not workable. So for example, here we have Apple search ads. There's two types of Apple search ad campaigns if you haven't run them before. There's one that is called the broad match campaign, and then there's exact match. The broad match campaign allows you to surface keywords that people are looking for in order to download your game, and then an exact match campaign is the follow-on from that, where you select the best performing keywords and bid to show an ad at the top of those. So you can see that the broad match campaigns for an installation cost us $20, whereas the exact match is much, much lower at $3, and they were bringing in $1.48. So it's this difference that you want to look at, because obviously you're going, yay, this is the highest quality traffic, I've got $1.90 coming in here, but I'm sending out $20, so it doesn't really make sense. This is for TCPA campaigns and CPI campaigns. So the CPI campaigns on the my left, your left as well? No. They're showing that, yeah, 6 cents for a cost of $1.07. Like $1 is a really competitive rate in the strategy genre. Generally speaking, it's between $1 and $1.15 or higher. US to acquire a strategy user. So we were getting really great CPIs through the network, we were just getting bad quality traffic. And then the TCPA campaigns, the cost per action campaigns, we were actually getting better quality traffic, but it was still just like slightly out of our reach. Looking back on this, I potentially think we could have optimized that further and made that a positive equation. But yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of things going on. And here is our Facebook app install campaigns. So they're all looking at the same regions. It's Android USA again. And you can see that for the app install campaigns, for Android, the quality is much, much lower than on Facebook for iOS. So if you are doing ads for iOS, Facebook would probably be the place to get them, because you can see there the equation's very close. And actually for iOS, we were able to lower those CPIs to around 50 cents on Facebook using dynamic creative ads, which I will show you how we did that in a little bit. Yeah. And here's Unity. So Unity on the left-hand side doesn't have LTV because I didn't have the metrics set up at that point to measure that, or I've lost them since, I don't know. But anyway, the cost was around $4 per install for a Unity campaign that ran for around 2 weeks. This is in US. And for iOS, the cost was a little bit under $6, but it did bring in 72-cent traffic over, I think that's a 60-day one. So yeah, it's really interesting to see. Like with Unity, I hear really good things about them. I don't know if you guys have used them, but I wasn't able to lower those CPIs on Unity the way I was with Google and Facebook, or even Apple search ads. So that seemed to be a bit more constant. I guess you'd want to be optimizing for your average revenue per paying user on Unity rather than your cost per install. And here's our best campaigns by ROI. So it was Apple search ads, the exact match campaign. You can see are really close together there. We almost got that one. You can see the CPA campaign here on Android is about 50% as well, as is the Facebook app install campaign for iOS, not Android. So yeah. So why is the quality bad? What is causing the quality to be bad? Well, there's a number of different factors, of course. Platform relevance, as I mentioned before, seeing the ad on the Play Store versus seeing it on YouTube or Instagram can all impact the relevance of the acquired user, as does the actual channel that you're using to acquire those users, whether it's Tapjoy, AppLovin, or any other user. It really depends on your game and what you're going for. There might be other games on certain platforms that just work really well for bringing your players in. Fraud is another reason, so making sure that you have a fraud detection service, or that you're looking into this, talking with your platform assistants in order to sort of understand why, for example, if you're running a US campaign, are your installs coming from Saudi Arabia? If you see things like that, that's the time to check on fraud. And of course, if your LTV drops significantly, it might be a good idea to look at that as well, because that could be a reason. If you have misleading creatives, players download and it's not what they expect, therefore they're probably going to drop out because it's, not the correct game. And then featuring impact, so it does lower the user intention and therefore the LTV, so the intention of the player to actually stay in the game. It's just a try before you buy. And then, of course, in-game factors. So you can't blame everything on the channels and the ads. Of course, you have to look internally. If you saw Christina Chen's talk this morning, she took you through all of the monetization experiments that we actually did throughout the last year. So if you didn't catch that and you're interested in what we actually did, go check that out when it's online. But yeah, as I say, it's no use acquiring players for a low cost if they don't spend money in the game or watch ads or bring in other users. So in order to make improvements to your game, you must look at your in-game economy, your ad placement and frequency, the retention, how fast are your players dropping out? That's very important for ROI, engagement and geographic placement, and your cultural relevance and localization. Localization can make a really huge impact as well. Making sure that you do put it in languages that you can afford to put it in will raise your monetization. And here's some of the changes that we did. So when we started on the game, we were getting around 0.02 USD cents, and we brought it up to $1.21 USD from when we started to now. And the two biggest impacts that we made on the in-game monetization were introducing league features and economy tuning. So you can see that we did some experiments on the right-hand side there with East and West economies, and we did have a result where our Western economy did perform better, so we ended up applying that. And I've got some of the changes outlined there as well. Just a note, any community managers in the room, if you happen to have live ops and you run a in-game event, making a social media focused event, we did a spring festival where we called it Easter egg hunt. We hid codes around our social media. It had a huge impact on people actually engaging with our social media. You can see the spike there in the top right-hand corner. That's just from one event, so it's really, really useful to do that. So before I move on to the fun part, because there is a fun part, this has just been a lot of graphs so far, just a note on paid influencer campaigns, which we ran quite a number of. Something to think about is that it's really the audience intention rather than the influencer's audience. And what I mean is that a larger audience isn't necessarily going to get you a better quality of traffic. I've just compared 4 here of the types of paid influencer campaigns that we did. We did go with one guy that had over 1 million subscribers, but you can see the conversion rate was super low. He only netted 394 installs. The revenue, $1.20. I paid 450 USD, so tell me how worth it that was. And then, ironically, at the bottom, we have the micro-influencer sphere, which is like 50,000 or less, bringing us 0.79 LTV, which is one of our highest sources of traffic. And what I'm essentially saying here is that what they've been saying in PR and marketing recently about micro-influencers does hold up. People who have smaller, more engaged audiences can be more worth it for you to work with than larger audiences who are kind of more like celebrities and their audience are really just there therefore viewing them rather than getting recommendations or wanting to support them through the platform. Okay, I need a big sippy of water because I'm about to tell you an amazing story. Yeah, it's for you, Anna. Okay, everybody knows that creatives have a huge impact on your costs of acquisition. So I'm going to tell you the story of how we got really, really, really weird ads. Has anybody seen these ads on Facebook? Put your hand up if you've seen this ad. So weird. What is going on? Like, this is crazy. It looks like some 90s Flash game. This is... what is that right-hand corner one? Like, wow. That's... How can you put that on Facebook? Like, what? I'm so confused. But yeah, so this is the ad that they're using, the ad creative, and at the bottom is the representation of their actual game, which both of them are a match and blast category mansion/house building type game. And yeah, it's really, really bizarre. I noticed it's starting to pop up maybe, I don't know, like 6 months to a year ago, maybe 6 months ago. And yeah, I started asking myself, like, what's going on here? This is really, really bizarre. So I'm going to tell you why we arrived at this point. So who recognises Homescapes or has played Homescapes? Yeah, it's so addictive. So Homescapes released in August 2017. It made $420 million revenue in its first year. And the way that it innovated on the Match and Blast category was by creating a story visual progression over outdated saga progression, which you see in things like Candy Crush. And they shut up, they are on track to become rivals with King. They're female focused, and for them, women players generally retain and monetize better than other genders in the Match and Blast category. So it's very focused on traditionally more feminine aesthetics and motivations. Firecraft Studios released Matchington Mansion a month later, 1 month later, and it's almost identical, okay? There is very, very little visual differences between these two games. It made $15 million in its first month. Yeah, it's insane. Mysteriously, 1 month, somehow this studio that is supposedly from San Francisco, with only 3 people, made this game in a month. Did they really make the game? I don't know. I have not gotten to the bottom of this mystery. If you look up their address on Google, it's a coffee shop. It's actually a coffee shop. Yeah, it's bizarre. And yeah, their studio is in the Cayman Islands. So, did Playworks make this? I don't know. It's so weird. Anyway, I guess not, because the war begins. They compete for the exact same audience, as you can see, because they're identical games. And Matchington Mansion started actually catching up and starting to cannibalize the audience of Homescapes. I promise I'm going to get back to user acquisition at some point. But Playworks retaliated because they could see that their Matchington Mansion game was starting to take market share, and with these games they have extremely long retention. I mean, months and months. You spend a lot of money in these games. So once you have that 15 million players or 15 million revenue, you're going to get a lot more and start catching up. And apparently, I haven't played Matchington Mansion, but apparently it does have some better mechanics than Homescapes. So Playworks started to panic, and they started an aggressive CPI campaign in order to stop Matchington Mansion from being able to acquire their players, essentially. And this actually drove CPIs up so high for this segment that other games such as Design Home, Covet Fashion, and Kim Kardashian Hollywood actually had to stop advertising because they couldn't afford. It was loss-leading advertising. And eventually, Matchington Mansion did have to back down because they don't have the coffers that Playworks has. So where can they catch up? This little equation that you see at the bottom is CPI. It's cost per mil over installs per 1,000 impressions. This IPM part is a new sort of part where people are starting to optimize, especially advertising networks. And the IPM part is important because you have influence over that. It's about the creatives, whereas CPM, cost per mil, is market determined. So what you pay for cost per mil is market determined, whereas you can obviously change the type of ad that you have. So that's where you can start to optimize, and you can measure how well your ads are doing through this metric IPM. So Matching to Mansion focused on this little thing here and began to excel. So this is where the game starts. In order to drive the cost back down, Firecraft had to try new ways to get people's attention, and they did not give a shit what they did. They created a bunch of misleading ads, really bad quality ads, sensationalist calls to action, and it drove prices way down. It actually really worked. And then Playworks noticed it was working and started copying them, actually just completely copying the ads. And I have to say, like, this is not okay. This should be illegal. Like, this is misrepresentation of product. It's just, like, it's really, really wrong. Like, I don't agree with it at all. However, it did drive CPIs down, and so they started trying to outdo each other for, like, who can make the weirdest ads. Let's go through them. So we have, the titular character from Playworks in the top, the butler. What's his name again? Arthur? Austin, yeah, haha. Yeah, Austin, he's having a bit of trouble there. He's being attacked by a bear. Maybe he can attack him with a pickle, I don't know. Yeah, it's just really bizarre. But then that's not even anything compared to Matching to Mansions. Like, yeah. FYI, in the bottom left corner, that's his knee and a hammer. But yeah. Yeah. And this over here, it even takes from Episode, which is another female, Episode and Choice is another female-focused, like a story game, and they take the ad format that works so well for their UA and stole that for Matching to Mansion, which is a match and blast game. They don't even have these mechanics in the game. Also, there's a one that's just completely wild. Like, that doesn't have anything. This monkey and this blonde woman, like, this has nothing to do with this game at all. Like, it's insane. Look at this ad. Like, why? So why do they work? Why do they work so well? Because they're obviously stupid, and we immediately understand what the problem is. They're sensationalists, they're emotionally driven, they're always asking or saying something that's very close to us, like, your home is on fire, or how do you save this person? Or in the case of, like, Austin, where he's, like, burning on the couch. Like, whoa, why? And it works so well because we want to stop. We want to go, nah, that's ridiculous, and we can fix it. We're not stupid. It's a winnable challenge, in other words. And this is also very different from other game ads that we've been really used to, and therefore noticeable, so it makes us stop scrolling. And Firecraft has actually persistently managed to lower their CPIs using this strategy and compete for those high LTV players. And we know these ads worked because Playworks started copying them. And not only the ads, but they literally just completely, Playworks actually then started copying Matching to Mansion, so much so that they have, like, identical icons. So they're basically saying, like, a big FU to Matching to Mansion and saying, well, if you're copying us, then we're copying you. So yeah, a mystery development studio, they don't even exist. They made this game in a month. They made these wild ads, and we don't even know who they are. It's really weird. So obviously, yeah, we had to try it. And yes, without the lying part, because, like, I'm really against that. It's misrepresentation. But yeah, we made this ad, and it drove our lowest CPIs that we were able to get. So here it is. It's so bad. I hate it so much. You got the idea. Yeah, so the strategy of stupid ads works, but I don't recommend that you lie about your product. Yeah, and you can see that the difference in Facebook ads, which I wasn't able to get to work for me initially when I started running UA, it drove actually down to 0.44 USD install costs, which, if you were paying attention to my quality section, which had the boring graphs in it, you'll know that that's very close to ROI. Unfortunately, at that point, I had to stop because I had spent enough money and I needed to save it for the next game. So yeah, we were able to improve using this dynamic ad strategy and using creative ads that look terrible. to lower our Facebook costs per install. So I guess there's that. You can try that if you want. And yeah, these are our old CPIs versus our new CPIs with these more like crazy ads. Yeah, it's a big difference. Yeah, so finally, the takeaway zone, yep, set your baselines on organic, uninfluenced traffic, please, for God's sake, do that. Try as many platforms as you can afford early if you haven't done UA before. Check the impact of featuring on your LTV. Quality very much matters. And make sure you iterate on your creatives often and look at what your competitors are doing because you might be able to steal their strategy. And of course, know when to stop. Don't keep pouring money into a hole if you can't afford to. If you're not achieving ROI, you have to stop and save your money for the next project. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I missed the monetization mechanics one, so maybe it was answered there. Did you do any cohort analysis alongside monetization experience experiments for the game and the traffic?
Yeah. We have our own internal tool for that. Yeah, cohort analysis is, you have to do that. We don't use anything that isn't cohorted because it's not true LTV, and everything I presented to you here is from our cohort analysis tool. So, yeah. Anybody else? Just posing, don't worry. All right, cool. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, Paulina.
So, talking about the ad that you didn't like that you made, and you talked about how the CPI was lower and was the best conversion. Was there any difference in, like, whether the players that you acquired during that ad were different in, like, retention and spend compared to others?
I haven't looked at that yet because I only finished running that ad set recently and I need to wait like 30 to 60 days to understand what the impact actually was. But ask me again in 30 to 60 days. Sorry, yeah, I'll find out for you. Yes?
Does spend also incorporate the cost of creating the assets or just how much it costs to actually put the ad on?
That's a really good question. Yes, because I made all the ads. Me and Skadros made all the ads. So it was time consuming. We made like over 300 ads. So yeah. It's expensive. Anything else? Yes?
Sorry, so was it the last one you showed, that was your own one, you had a positive ROI on?
It wasn't even positive. It was closest. If I had more money, I would keep running with that ad because I didn't test it on all platforms. I was just like, my budget's up. Like I did that as a last ditch to, try. Because you kind of have to try, right? Like you can't stop a campaign or stop something before you've tried everything within your power. But if I could keep running this, I totally would because it's really close. Yeah. Great. Yes.
The beginning sort of ads, campaigns that you ran, the ones on the left, did you do any video versions of them?
Yeah, oh, these are videos. Sorry, they're just not showing as videos. Yeah, I did. So for my market testing, for my demographic testing, I did just did static ads, and then we moved to video ads when we were testing our actual creatives. Video ads perform better. Yeah.
A question. How regularly do you recommend testing icons? I know that you guys rotate every now and then.
Oh, we test icons constantly, like all the time. Yeah, if you can, as much as you can, just test icons all the time through store experiments.
Like a seasonal, like themed icon versus normal?
We haven't. Yeah. I would though. Oh wait, we did a spring one, but I haven't seen the data for that. My community manager would be able to tell you. But yeah, just always run store experiments because the other thing that we noticed is that whenever we change regardless of how well a experiment performs, when changing to the best variable, we get a boost in traffic. So it's a small boost, but it's a boost, right? So if you change them often, I don't know, maybe you guys see that as well, but yeah, I've noticed that happens. Yeah. Don't be afraid. If you have any other questions, feel free to come find me afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, one last one. In your last talk last year, you talked about how you use different methodologies of motivation to demarcate your players, like mastery or social.
Yeah, we did. So what Paulina is talking about, is Paulina, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. What Paulina was talking about is that when we did our market testing, we used Quantic Foundry player motivation research to segment and inform what types of creatives we made. If you're not familiar with that, it's a six-tier profile ranging from players who are motivated by social to competitive play, mastery, strategy, etc. And we created video and static assets that represented the motivation. So we showcased strategy elements of the gameplay more, or action elements of the gameplay more, or we showed the in-game chat to represent social. And yeah, that carried through the whole way. Actually, we used action and strategy pretty much exclusively. Like when we focused on collection of characters or like other elements, it didn't really work as well.
Yeah, because I'd be really curious if that new style of ad that you didn't like, that worked or played into it, or if it just went against it.
It's just different factors. Like you can use a lot of different methodologies in order to create stuff like that. The Quantic Foundry is just obviously the one that I chose, but yeah, this strategy still kind of worked, so it's just a different thing. Yeah. Is that it? We're good for time? Thank you so much. Thank you.